presentation up. Unfortunately, net access is going up and down for me, so I can't get access to my presentation. Not that it matters. This morning when I woke up at 6 a.m., decided I wasn't going down that path anymore. Decided to change things up a bit. What I want to chat about today is developers leaving money on the table when they're hosting for their customers. A lot of developers send their stuff out to hosting companies, like ourselves sometimes, for our fluffy web hosting, things like that, or GoDaddy, Media Temple, whomever. It doesn't really matter. I think developers, if they have the skill set in place, should start looking at doing their hosting through cloud providers and setting things up and working with their customers so that their customers are with you, the developer. Long term, they're going to stay with you probably longer. You've got a little walking going on. The other thing is all the authentication information you need to remember. You've got one customer at GoDaddy, one customer at Media Temple, one customer at DreamHost, and somebody wants an update. That's a lot of data to keep together. You know, even with tools like 1Password and stuff like that, you still have to go look it up. But if you host it on your own stuff, your own virtual system of some type, whether it's the term VPS, some virtual server somewhere, or some clustered system somebody set up for you for your use. Now everything's in one place for you and your customers. You'll get to tune it the way you want to. You'll be able to take care of your customers the way you want to. You'll be able to add customers as you wish without waiting for another provisioning system, making sure the provisioning system's online in some cases, or being limited by things, you know, whatever control panel that provider has decided to put together for you, which may or may not allow you to make some changes that you may need to make for a customer. So that's what the presentation was supposed to be about, and that's still what I want to talk about. But now we have no presentation for the moment, and we still have the same topic. Going out when looking at going to a cloud provider of some type, whether it's Amazon, Disney's got some stuff still. We have our stuff, Rackspace. Everyone has something they're doing for different kinds of things. Amazon, great. You want to cloud burst and do a whole bunch of VMs at once to handle your extra load, something going on? Awesome for that. You want to put all of your customers out there? Do remember to buy yourself some EBS or the Elastic Block Storage disk, because VM instances in Amazon do not have persistent storage. Rackspace is the same way. That can bite you if you're not careful. And if you do the EBS volume, you do have more setup and configuration to do. There's not a lot of templates out there that automatically, for an AMI template, have an EBS volume attached. So you're going to have to go through the work of getting all that stuff set up. Other side of it, anybody based on VMware will have persistent disk. Most of the systems using things like CloudStack as their interface will have persistent disk. So those are the main two differences you have to kind of look for. But beyond that, everything else is the same. By putting your stuff out there and just only thing you're offloading is the actual where is my machine loaded. Keeping everything else yourself will keep that money on the table for you long term. And you can charge your customers and look at their usage and say, this customer, WordPress blog, I'm going to charge them $5. This customer's got a whole layout, like someone came in today and brought up Magento. I've only met one other person using Magento. Magento takes a lot more resources than a WordPress blog. Maybe you have to charge them differently. You know, or in some cases, maybe you put them onto a separate instance. You know, mark it up as you need to or not. The point is the customer stays with you, whether it's for 3 months or 2 years. From a hosting provider point of view, where I come from, if I get a customer into my systems, it's now for me to lose them. You know, I have to screw up now for a customer to look for something else. It's not necessarily going to be an issue of performance or something like that. I'm going to have to actually screw something up before they take off. My computer went to sleep. See if we can turn that off. Oh, anytime, interject, and we've got a couple hecklers out here that will be speaking up, I'm sure, at some point to have fun at my expense. So I just summed up my 22-minute presentation in about 6 minutes. So maybe the presentation would have been better. Anybody here doing stuff out in the cloud today with their hosting stuff? 1, 2, 3, okay. People are slowly raising their hands. How's your experience been doing that? And are you a developer or are you a hoster? You raised your hand first, so.
Yeah, I'm a developer, and my company is primarily using Amazon Web Services, and it's been a heck of a lot easier than what I've used in the past. Since we're kind of a small company, don't have a whole lot of people, just being able to take care of that on the side isn't been as much time consuming as it's been.
And as you need to, you just spin up more stuff.
Yeah.
And put your customers onto it, and away you go. It's great for starting off small and growing as large as you want or as large as you need to. What about other people? Anybody using something different?
I'm using Rackspace. And primarily for me, my application is database driven, so I just set up a basically master slave with MySQL back to another server to replicate the data. So if it goes down, it's saved. Recently, it's not too bad of a service. It'll automatically make nightly backups for you, weekly, things like that, which for my purposes for code isn't too bad. And price-wise, they seem to be reasonably competitive. And maybe if you're a more traditional person like me, I used to have a dedicated host at ISP over downtown for a while, and it's kind of a hassle when the machine goes down. You gotta go out there and get it and fix it up. And for me, it's like something goes down, just create another instance, or maybe I want to mess around with a software upgrade and see how that's going to work. Fire up another instance and do my testing. So from that standpoint, it's worked out far better than dedicated hosts.
So Tom brings up a point. One of the things that's very nice about getting stuff out there because like cloud, and I'm not going to air quote it every time though I want to, is that when you're dealing with a dedicated host of some type, everything fails. Period. All hardware fails at some point along the way. It's how recovery occurs. When you have stuff out there in the greater system, most of these companies have redundancies built in. So that when a system does go belly up, and they do, your stuff is automatically restarted. Hopefully with the data you're hoping for, without any interaction from you. Or if there is interaction, minor interaction. Maybe you have to, go tickle something. Or database, you need to run a MyAgSend check. Make sure that your tables are okay. That kind of stuff is not automatic. While dedicated hosts, you may get some slight extra performance out of it. But again, you have a hosting customer and they've got a server in your data center, there's a good chance 5 years from now, it's still the same server. While a hosting company doing this kind of stuff, they're going to do updates from time to time. They're going to take care of things and make sure that as time goes on, they add the capacity, they're buying more and more current systems. And you get kind of the free upgrades along the way. But running on a single host can be a big hassle. Double disk failure, anybody ever have that with their RAID systems? It sucks. Recovery is very difficult, backups. You don't know your backups work unless you try to restore. And how many people really try their restores before they think everything's good? They don't.
One other thing is that when you're looking at whether dedicated or cloud or public cloud or even private cloud, I guess some of these now have like APIs that match Amazon, seems to come to default factor API. Your application needs to be architected differently for each. I mean, when you really start looking at like dedicated hosting, say monolithic server or even client server type systems in the back end versus a cloud, you want to build in the reliability, the redundancy, the burst into the application, build it up. So I'll just use Amazon because that's my experience. You want to build that in so instead of getting a burst in traffic, you can actually fire off some more instances and you can handle that load. If it starts scaling, you want to be able to handle it software-wise. So there's a huge level of architectural differences in between. So I think that's a huge aspect to take a look at as well.
Could you guys down here hear him at all? All right, good. Because Mark brings up a very, very good point. You can't just, if you're going to try to burst, you're not just going to be able to run up another instance of WordPress and have something all of a sudden do more. It's not going to happen. There's other work involved with your application. And picking on WordPress, anybody here is a WordPress person? I'm not trying to pick on WordPress itself. I'm just using that as an example. The CMS or block system doesn't matter. So you do have some work to do if you're going to utilize the classic cloud systems as they were originally designed, like what Amazon has done, what Rackspace has going on. They have APIs. You want to launch more instances of what you already have configured, a couple buttons, and away it goes. There's automated systems to take care of that. Amazon's got an automated system that does it. A company called RightScale in Stratus, local company. We have some Stratus folks in this room today, maybe not. They all have stuff for doing that for you. So your application stuff to be able to support that. If you have a centralized database and you're all database driven, as Tom brought up, it might be a little bit easier to burst out, have your application all come back to your database to get all your stuff. But if you're more traditional in your CMS stuff, you've got local files need to get copied over as well, some of those assets, and that's why you see things coming out of S3. People will have one master system, pushes all to S3, all the front-end client systems are linking back to S3, so you have less stuff to deal with. But you have to think about that ahead of time.
I have a security question. Because I'm doing his website, an attorney has asked me, you know, if he should be putting stuff out in Dropbox. And I feel really like some of the stuff I store in Dropbox, you know, it's just files for the website. If it gets out farther, great. But if he's putting documents, client documents, out in Dropbox, I think that's just a really bad idea because I don't know how secure it is. So how do you figure out what is secure and what is not? Do I need to ask, do you have, you know, an SSL certificate, and is that enough? Give me one command.
Okay. Dropbox is a way of sharing files, either amongst your own computers, or you can share things. A couple of IPL people here, so I've got a shared folder with Alex, I've got a shared folder with Ben, and our stuff is that way. How secure is Dropbox? There's been a couple things over the last year that have been brought up. There was last year's, for a very short period of time, somebody could log in as anybody and look at things. The most recent one that just came through a couple days ago is that somebody has access to your phone and is able to get at a plist file or crowdsourced file. They copy that to their phone and get access to your Dropbox files. Unfortunately, Facebook has the exact same problem. They didn't encrypt their stuff. It's as secure as you want it to be. At the same time, it's secure enough for most things. Would I put medical data out there? Probably not. I'm not going to put my social security number out there either. But I use 1Password, all my stuff's encrypted, and I use Dropbox to store all that data. And just show of hands here, people using 1Password, they probably do the exact same thing, because it is the easiest way to have multiple computers synchronized with the same password system. Amir?
I was just going to say that you know, if you encrypt it, that's fine. Don't trust or don't rely on anybody other than you to keep your data safe. You wouldn't hand your wallet or your purse to somebody else to hold. See, hold this for me and take care of my money for me, because that money will disappear. And same thing with Dropbox. You don't hand your private, confidential, secret documents to somebody else to safeguard for you without you making sure that they're encrypted so that only you can read them.
And specifically for all Dropbox,
Sorry, let me just
Could you talk louder?
Dropbox, they're not interested in the level of security required by the legal industry. At the same time, most of what lawyers produce are a matter of public record, so it's a policy issue. You know, that's going to be available on the web anyway for free, but it is a policy.
Did that answer some of your questions? All of it?
I just want to provide an alternative. Since Dropbox, or at least I don't know if it still does, use S3 as their backend for storage. You can basically create your own S3 buckets and set up your own policies and control all that much more fine-grained control than what you can on Dropbox.
Another thing you could do is utilize Spider Oak is another one. Spider Oak, the only people that have the key is you. When you lose your key, you lose all your data. You know, so there's nothing stored, like with Dropbox, there's a shared key involved. This has no shared key. When you share something with somebody, you are, you know, explicitly sharing that directory or that file with somebody, and they also have to have things like Spider Oak installed. So that's another option. The more paranoid you are, the more you should look at things like Spider Oak, and there's a bunch of other ones as well. But Dropbox is the easy, lowest common denominator. The other thing about it is that it's very fast. Again, thinking 1Password, you're dropping these little 200 to 500 byte files out there, and if you have another computer next to you that you're synced with, you drop the file there and it shows up immediately, which comes in very handy. Spider Oak and others, they have a longer sync time, But depending on what you're moving around, it may not matter. Someone over here want to say something? Anyone? All right, left side of the room still winning.
Let's talk about cost, breakpoint, and scalability. You know,
Okay.
When does it become more cost effective to do dedicated hosting or create your own private cloud? Let's just call it that way, dedicated hosting, private cloud versus going out to a public cloud like Amazon or Rackspace. That's pretty much a good question to be looked at.
I had a big chart for that specifically.
Peckle.
Yes. So when looking at doing stuff out there, you have a bunch of stuff out there. You had stuff out there, Rackspace, Amazon. At some point, for some people, it makes sense to bring stuff not necessarily in-house, but in more control, in a more controlled billing thing. Amazon, Rackspace, so you can spin up so many things. You don't know what your billing's going to be next month if you have an automated system in place. You could all of a sudden find yourself with a nice big bill that you weren't expecting. Private cloud, using that term, or virtual data center of some kind, gives you a very consistent price thing. You may get the same performance. You know, it depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish and what your system application, whatever you're trying to do. If it's MySQL layout, you know, performance might be great, you know, but now I want to burst to 500 servers. Well, a private system or a virtual data center is not going to do that. You may still have to go back out to Amazon, Rackspace, or something like that to be able to do those kinds of bursts. So what price point? I think everyone's going to have a different price point for that. Things can be relatively cheap. There's people out there doing virtual data centers for $200 a month. That's one of the things that we do. At the same time, you can hop onto Amazon and you can fire up 2 or 3 small instances to take care of your stuff for under $100 a month. You know, ignoring the whole EVS volume thing. You can bring some stuff up and go that way. You know, so I think every customer is going to have to evaluate what they're trying to do. There's also the level of control. Putting stuff out onto Amazon, you are putting your server out there. You may have control of your server, but you don't necessarily have control of other things. You may have a noisy neighbor that's saturating your segment with bad traffic. You know, you call up Amazon, you know, how long is it going to take to resolve that? I don't know anybody who's had that problem, but every network has an issue like that. Every shared server, DreamHost or Media Temple or some other, it can happen even on, we'll pick on my stuff. IPL's web cluster. Last year had a customer who had somebody doing bad things, trying to post hundreds of megabytes of data to a form that could not accept hundreds of megabytes of data. And the malicious person kept doing it over and over again, and they became the noisy neighbor for all of my customers on our web cluster because nobody else was getting any traffic in because we were locking up all of the Apache processes and burning hundreds of megabits of data, doing nothing. So having your own private system will help contain that a bit. You could still have a noisy neighbor that could cause some other issue for you, but hopefully not. The other thing with moving towards private cloud, virtual data center, some of that allows to come with SLAs as well. When you call in, you'll get somebody on the phone. You won't necessarily have to go through a bunch of other diagnostics first. Maybe. You know, I can only speak for ourselves. We're not gonna go through a bunch of things, telling you to reboot your computer and stuff like that. You know, like the cable company would do. Oh, 2 hands went up.
I just had a different. I'm looking at it from a different perspective. We're actually looking from going from private and looking at other cloud services like Amazon because I think it's application specific. So you can have a shared host with 20 WordPress sites or just regular sites, and that's one instance of it. But one area we've seen issues is the scalability of that Amazon provides. If we have a massive surge in traffic at one point in time, the ability to spin up those extra servers without having to go and buy $25,000 servers is kind of nice.
Very nice.
But at the same time, you know, I think there's potential segments of our hosting business that do just totally fine with us doing this kind of more traditional private network, doing all of that infrastructure investment over the years to where it is profitable. But we're looking at it from the opposite and saying, okay, we have this big virtual infrastructure with a couple of racks at a data center, and looking at Amazon because we have an application that has a significant amount of traffic in September, but virtually nothing in June because because of the school year, that's nice to be able to scale up and down and charge, and bill accordingly or have our costs happen accordingly.
Yep. I'm gonna come back to your thing, but he raised his hand as well.
Yeah, I was going to answer your question about noisy neighbors and Amazon. So the first thing is, unless you pay a lot of extra money, you're not going to call Amazon, because they're not going to answer the phone. They don't provide phone support unless you pay extra. However, if you have a server with an EBS root volume, you can stop and start it without losing any of your data. And generally speaking, when you stop and restart a server, it gets restarted somewhere else. So often the way to get rid of a noisy neighbor is to just stop and restart it, and it'll likely get moved to somewhere far away from them. So that's another example. I mean, Amazon is very much of a big mass provider. You don't get customized support unless you pay a lot of money. But on the other hand, you get this tremendous power and flexibility that allows you to work your way around a lot of problems by yourself.
Everybody hear that over here?
Yeah.
So another set of good points. One second, Mark. To address your thing as well, you have your own infrastructure today. You have a customer who needs to do something. Using the application setup, you could also set it up so that you could burst into Amazon, Rackspace, or whomever can handle your bursting, and then bring it back down. Still doing the same kind of cost containment. I'm busy in September, I'm going to charge that customer more in September, but the rest of the month where it's just status quo, posted on my stuff with contained costs.
Right.
So and then people call that a hybrid cloud, where you have your own private cloud, or you have something set up somewhere, regardless, and then you burst into the same provider or a different provider to take care of excess traffic needs. You get really busy, somebody puts you on dig, or all of a sudden they're on ABC News and didn't tell you ahead of time. Mr. Greer.
On a customer of mine, a company called Digital Chocolate, had to make that decision of, they started out on Amazon, they eventually got to the point of, I'm tired of writing a six-figure check to Amazon every month, I'm sure I can do this cheaper. I think they went far past where the crossover point is. But one of the interesting things that they told us is, Amazon's great when they're starting up a new game that they don't know how popular it is. They don't know how much of their in-house data center is going to have to be dedicated to it. And it's great on the downhill slope. Once the game's not popular anymore, they can take, on the upslope, they put it on Amazon. They don't know how big it is. Once they've got an idea of the base kind load, they can move it to their private cloud. When it's on the downslope, they move it back to Amazon, but they can save money by starting to turn the servers on.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very dynamic process for them rather than sort of one-time cost analysis.
And I think that's the big point. People have to start looking at it.
Pick up, Mark.
I think that's one of the things people have to do is look at it and say, what is the cost benefit? Where does it go here? Where does it go there? I think hybrid clouds are going to be more of the aspect there for a lot of companies. Like in his case, here with the September to June. I mean, that's where they're going to have to go. Otherwise, like you said, six-figure checks to Amazon, we could buy a data center for that and put it up in there. So.
But who's going to man it?
It'll be kind of it'll be in there as well.
That's one of the points that I wanted to make about the cost side of things. Now I think that there's one of the biggest issues we have with our clients is the distinction between the actual hardware. We're dealing in hardware. We actually purchase the hardware, and that's our structural investments. But then there's the actual, the hard cost of staffing it. And when we support a data in an application, we're a development shop that happens to host our solution. So when they call, it's a matter of us identifying, is this a hosting, an actual hosting, meaning that if this were on Amazon, would they need to call Amazon, or is this an application support side of things? So I think that's one of the big questions and distinctions. I think the point about Amazon not answering the phone is absolutely correct. I think that to get some sort of to get that support, you're not going to get that from Amazon. You kind of need to go to the developer in some cases. So that's a tricky balance. Is this a development and application support problem, or is this an actual physical hardware issue?
To some extent, when you're starting to work with especially Amazon, hosting becomes kind of part of your application, and how you manage it, how it becomes part of what you're doing. It doesn't become a separate domain as much anymore because you can design your application to just kind of
users are researchers, and they're very CPU bound for their work. And we use monopoly money to allocate resources, and we have a queuing system. And every now and then, the researchers will come to us and say, well, I want my job to run now. I want to run it in Amazon. And they go out, and they do the math, and they come back and say, no, it's okay, I'll take your monopoly money. Because in the end, for CPU-intensive applications, Amazon does not scale as well as buying your own hardware, in our experience. We buy a supercomputer every couple of years, costs a couple $1 million. We have 2,000 researchers on it. And for those 2,000 researchers to each buy their own Amazon instances is not, it just does not scale. So, you always have to look at it you have to do the math on it all the time. Like you said, it might be easy for the startup and the shutdown, but that middle period, chances are running your own will work best.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the utility scaling in some aspects where somebody says, I have 50 web servers and my application is so popular, I just need another 20 more. And then you run into other problems that aren't anticipated, like TCP and cache or stuff like that. And what's your past experience with that, some of your customers?
I have no experience with that for some of my customers. I haven't had to deal with that at this point in time. Closest thing we had, I made a statement earlier about getting on ABC television or ABC News, and all of a sudden getting busy. We had a customer who actually had that happen. ABC News, whatever that morning show is, maybe it's called Morning Show, and all of a sudden we got lit up. So for us, we went from our small number of web servers at the time. I think we had 6 at the time. We went to 17 in a couple of hours. I had extra hardware lying around to light them up. Everything we do is load balance, so it was relatively simple. That's the best example I have for your question. I don't know how to answer your question, unfortunately. Anybody here have a larger system where you've had a bunch of things going and had to burst it by another 40% over a short period? Yeah, great question.
Have people seen the Netflix cloud architecture slides that are out on the internet?
Yep.
I mean, Netflix runs their streaming service completely on Amazon now, and I mean they are the poster child for bursting scalability. And I mean they'll go like, I mean they're talking about tens of thousands of servers, and they might be spinning up and down by a factor, not by a factor, but by several thousand servers over the course of a few hours. So,
and their application was built to do that.
yes,
Because their original did not do that.
It's worth a read from a scalable fault-tolerant architecture perspective.
I work in, or used to work in market data, and there's times where you can. It depends on the problem domain. If you're web-based, I think like the cloud works really well to scale up. But if you're in a situation where you're latency sensitive, you still need to host your own stuff. I mean,
That ends up being a very good point. One of the things that happens out there in the cloud, again, in the general sense of the term, is that since there's certain you don't have control over and no way to actually get resolution, Amazon can be an example of where you can have high latency on your disk. If your disk is latent, how's your MySQL queries go if it's not already cached? They start to suck. And so you have to take that stuff into account sometimes. So that's part of what you're bringing up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then there's also just regular internet latency kind of things, but that was a tougher one to deal with sometimes.
You
You have things like
network microbursts, where these trading firms will send big bursts of data that don't show up on your network monitoring tools because they all show up on like sub-millisecond basis and monitoring bytes per second and things. It's just, yeah.
That's another thing. If your application is built for it, you can use a content delivery network or a CDN. Akamai, Limelight, Level 3 has one. You can build your own if you want to take the time. So you could use Amazon, and you could light up something West Coast, East Coast, and Asia. You put up your own CDN network. Kind of like the S3 thing, but do it yourself. You know, Nginx can do that for you.
Amazon
That can
actually does
remove.
have a CDN that you can use, the Cloud Front system.
Okay.
They have a lot more influence around the world than what their regular data centers are at.
Okay. I did not know that. Thanks. So that can help with some latency type issues, web-based or file transfer based of some kind. What he brought up with trading systems and pushing bursts of data, that's a little different. I don't think most people here are dealing with that. Go ahead.
What kind of services, I'm new to cloud, so what kind of services can be hosted on Amazon? I mean, other than the regular, your application, can you host a database service, MQ, any FTP?
Yep, anything you want, except outbound SMTP. So outbound email, you have to run through and pay for another service from them, because they block outbound SMTP from the normal AWS systems. You know, because otherwise every scammer in the world is going to go pay their 10 cents an hour.
There's
like something else.
other sort of limitation. If you have anything that needs direct hardware access to anything, you won't be able to run that.
Yeah, if you had a USB dongle, that's not happening.
So how about NAS based? I mean, do they give some kind of NAS mounts and stuff?
Nope, if you want NAS, you build it yourself.
So
you can't mount it either. You have to kind of build it into your application.
Well, but I mean, the Elastic Block Store is a storage network. It's just not one you have visibility or control of.
Yeah, and it's very SAN-based because it's attached to your stuff. It's not
NAS.
NAS.
It's to one instance at a time. So you can't test it anymore.
So if you want to do a NAS system, you're going to have to build it yourself.
So I can have an NAS system on my infrastructure, part of my infrastructure, but still connect my application to that is running on Amazon.
I would do it over VPN, but sure, you could do that. Unfortunately, you're going to have some latency.
There are some people that do NFS sharing on a particular instance or two, or use like cluster effects to do distributed file storage among several different instances. Just basically, if you're your application that you can't modify your application to work with S3, because it's not really a block store, you can do other things like NFS and cluster effects from the original file storage and file access.
The thing about cluster FS is you can also create your own redundancies as well. That way if the system goes belly up, your data is still on a different cluster piece. Which would, again, in the general cloud sense, you want some redundancies either built into your application or you build them into your infrastructure that you are building out. Like if you want to do a NAS thing, build it yourself, build some redundancies in place. That will save you long term.
In that particular case, what I would probably do is I would actually have a proxy set up, hosted on Amazon, then just serve your content over HTTP. And then that way you're only making repetitive calls for content that's changed.
We still have 20 minutes left.
One thing you haven't touched on, and she kind of touched on it a little bit, but as we've seen over the past few months, the United States has kind of set up a little bit of closed for business sign and going in and seizing things. Mega uploads, TV chats, whether it's copyright or whatever, but there are other things that they're kind of going after too, say bodog.com got basically taken out. One of the things I think people have to also consider is when you start going to say Amazon or something like that, you don't really have the physical control of the systems either from a legal standpoint.
No, if they get served by the government, they got to turn over, and that's any provider you talk to. If you're a dial customer of mine storing your email with me, and the gov comes in and hands me my subpoena, I got to turn your data over. Not much I can do about it. Of course, there are specific things they have to ask for.
Yeah,
I will
but
fight back and make sure
they'll just come to your facility anyway.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're hosted at Equinox or AT&T or out of your garage. They'll show up 4 in the morning.
The difference is
you're out of business.
Yeah. The difference is knowing about it, and for instance,
you won't. Not till they show up.
Not till
they show up.
You know, there will be times when, like Mike said, I mean, they can actually put a gag order on it.
Yep.
I mean, they can just copy it, take it. They may not take it, they can just copy it.
Maybe just copy it. I've been in the business for a long time. I've got the whole from the gag order thing saying, we're going to do this and you can't tell anybody. I've done that. I've been the person they've asked to help them. where I've got to go look at my customer's data with them sitting next to me, and that's not fun. I can tell you right now for the content I had to look at. Get subpoenas, you know. You're a spammer now, I'm just going to call you that, and you're also doing some fraud. You know, City of Minneapolis sends me a thing, and I go, oh, that's great, you know what, I'm not going to do this for you. And they're like, why? It's like, you didn't do all of this. You are asking for something big. You want PJ's data, and that's fine. I need you to rewrite your subpoena specifically for this customer. I won't use your name until they actually give me the correct data, but I will push back at times. But unfortunately, all their stuff comes with, I can't tell you that I just gave them all of your email.
There is, this is tangential, but there is somewhat good news in this front. About a couple months ago, there was a Supreme Court decision that if you PGP encrypt your data or do something like that, they can't compel you to give up the key.
That was up in Colorado.
Was it?
Yeah, that's only a circuit court, not Supreme Court.
But it's considered precedent.
For that circuit.
It used to be they just throw you in jail until you go.
Those that are catching up on this part of it, it's, let's say you encrypt your hard drive. Right now, precedent's being set, and we'll see how far it goes. You can't necessarily be compelled. Right now, it's in one area. We'll see what happens as it goes through the rest of the court system to actually turn over those keys. It's part of the self-incrimination thing. But I thought it was just an interesting reading and kind of moved on from there.
Except for the fact that unless you travel internationally and you come back to the U.S., then you can be compelled to provide the password because...
Nobody ever leaves the U.S.
Of course not. What was I thinking?
Hotel California, did you ever hear the song? Yeah, there's lots of little rules. But like I said, they came to me. You're not going to know. I have to do what they say.
Also, I believe Amazon Web Services has a white paper on how to encrypt your data, and also on ways to, protect it for it to meet the HIPAA laws. So you could encrypt the storage, so if they were served, I don't know.
They would only get encrypted data,
right?
Which then they would have to crack.
Well,
and they will be able to.
Outside of HIPAA, then there's also if you do any type of commerce. So I don't know if anyone has any experience with complying with like PCI laws from credit card companies. I sidestep most of it by not storing any of the credit card data and letting the payment gateway, deal with it. But if anyone wants to do like referring payments or subscriptions, become a little more difficult anyway. Your due diligence bar I think would be much higher for your cloud.
Yeah, PCI is a whole other discussion. That's a funny ruling, I think. Go ahead.
Amazon, or the cloud.
You go ahead.
Governance, governance things like HIPAA, SOX. Sorry. Governance stuff like HIPAA and SOX, and all corporates are feeling about it.
I'm going to give some of my opinions, which are not necessarily the opinions of IT House or other companies. I think HIPAA is for the customer, not for me necessarily, because I don't know what your data is. I don't want to know what your data is. SOX would be the same way. Amazon has papers up on how to take care of your own security for HIPAA, Sarbanes-Oxley, and other kinds of things like that, and those things should be read and looked at as well. Basically, whatever you need to do to be HIPAA compliant, you should do, period. Don't rely upon your provider to do it. You're going to have a whole different range of things. Like, there's supposedly a data center PCI compliance thing. Now, we've been looking a little bit, trying to find the exact details on that so we can make our data center PCI compliant. But so far, everything we've had to deal with PCI-wise, not our stuff in particular, that's a whole different thing. But we get a customer, we'll pick on PJ again. PJ wants to do something, and she goes and gets scanned, and something fails. She's got to deal with that. It's her system, that kind of thing. There's nothing we can do except help out and give hints. Hey, you just failed this because you have a cross-site scripting thing. You're going to have to fix your cross-site scripting thing. Captain Obvious, of course, but we help our customers through those kinds of stuff. You got to go after, because the guy just to your left there, or your right.
So it seems like most of our discussion today so far has been about infrastructure as a service.
Yes.
I'm interested to know if there's people running stock on Amazon or Google App Engine, where you're getting into more of out of the system image and worrying about that, and really just deploying your app is one level up really from what we're talking about today.
think you're alone, sir. Look, I don't really think so. But no one's raising their hand yet.
I think, to me, it's the same thing. We went through a big step when we went to the capability of what Amazon offers in traditional AWS, and some of the services like Beanstalk and Google App Engine are really, I think, a similar step in terms of what they mean for change.
I looked at working with Beanstalk a little bit, and it's really just kind of automation on top of EC2 more than something that's a platform where everything just kind of, I think Google Apps is a little bit more of a platform where you just upload the code and it's just run somewhere.
That's my assessment too, and I have done some work on Google App Engine, and Beanstalk's a little bit disappointing to me in that they still have the concept of images, and you pay for them as images, and they'll scale the size that you choose and that kind of thing, where Google App Engine's truly, I'm deploying my app, and I'm setting some parameters around that, what I'm willing to pay for in terms of scaling, but beyond that, I don't have any knowledge or understanding of the system.
I think doing some of those things works good when you're small, but you'll eventually get a point where you're going to need more fine-grained control of what's going on, and you can't really do that on Google App Engine. It's just going to be out there running on however they have their system set up to run.
Well, you're relying on them as
Yeah.
your provider, and you have to know what you can and can't control. But I can make the argument that their ability to scale is much more significant
Yeah.
than anything you could ever do.
There's also limitations on that. Can't make outbound HTTP query or want to run 2 or 3 seconds or something. So your application needs something that is not in your app. You may not be able to run.
Right. Yep. Got to understand.
Mr. Hemphill?
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to follow up on your compliance comment. In our data center, what we found is our clients arrange for their PCI compliant audits and such, and they may bring their auditors into our data center to audit the facility from that standpoint, but typically that's the way it's worked for us.
Yep, and then we've got a couple of colo people that bring their auditors in,
Yep.
go look at things, and then they leave, and all done.
Yeah, because most of that compliance for hosting providers is mainly going to be just facility security, I think.
It is. So far.
Yeah.
Which is SAT 70 and
Yeah.
SSAE 60, CPAs.
Yeah.
We still have 11 minutes we can burn. Who's getting bored?
Can we talk a little bit about, like Amazon's had some publicized service interruptions?
I'm happy to talk about those.
Coaching?
No, not like that.
I mean, I haven't seen anything from Rackspace yet, but I'm under no illusion that can't happen. I mean, I'm just waiting really for...
I'll step back 40 minutes and say everything fails, period. In my business, I will next week lose a hard drive. I can guarantee I'm going to lose a hard drive. There's a chance I'm going to lose a whole server. It can happen. When I say yes, I'll happily talk about Amazon. Amazon has been publicizing their stuff a little bit more, which I think is good. I think being transparent about things is helpful for your customers, my customers. It's also helpful so that people realize that even if you were to make a mistake, you're all human along the way. But in the end, everything fails. So Amazon has a couple of big ones in the recent past that have happened. And I think the only reason you're really seeing a lot about them is that, you have Amazon, and you have Rackspace, and you have everybody else. That's kind of how it is. Amazon has the majority of the cloud providing, with air quotes again. And when something happens on their network at their size, it's going to be big and it's going to affect a lot of people.
Such as households burning fiber optic cable?
Under a bridge?
Yes.
That was a long time ago.
Hey, but they were redundant fibers.
In the same bundle. So everybody has failures. I'm sure Rackspace has had some stuff. They're usually pretty good about being transparent, but they're transparent to their customers, not to the public. So if you've not seen anything, then you probably haven't had a failure that affected you so far. But it could happen. I'm going to assume you've got your app built to handle that.
Yeah.
And they're running in more than one Amazon area, because mostly obviously just took that taken down.
Yep.
One part of their network, not the whole thing. It's non-trivial to set it up to run in the different availability zones and do
traffic, so.
Yeah, like one of the things I don't know, can you take an EBS from East 1 to East 2? I don't know if you can.
Not easily.
Not easily.
Basic export and import.
Okay.
You can very easily Snapchat your EBS constantly, you know, for very inexpensive, and have the ability to quickly bring things back up. So I mean.
Even in different availability zone though?
Yeah.
You can,
So
you can,
you
within the
do
zone
things
itself.
right, you have a plan for how you're going to, what you're gonna do when some part of the handling fails, you're bring it up over there. And
So,
that-
what you're saying is plan for failure.
You need architect your application for failure.
Where things get hard with Amazon is when you want to move between regions.
Yeah.
I worked with a customer to do an experiment when the big hurricane came up the East Coast and was heading straight at US East. We did an experiment to figure out whether we could move our app to the West Coast. And starting from scratch, not having done any planning whatsoever beforehand, we were able to put it in a state where we could have spun it up if we needed to with about 6 man-hours work. So it's very doable, but it's a significant, going between availability zones, if you think it through a little bit, is pretty easy. Going from region to region is definitely a qualitative step up. It's difficult.
And they will roll out different services, different regions at different times.
Yes.
It only complicates matters.
Yeah.
Do you have control of that? Say that I want this one service, one service, you get one service.
No, they will introduce a new feature to US East, and then a few weeks later.
But those are edge, I mean, the
Those
core
are
of their
edge.
functionality is the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Oh, 2. You go first.
So the problem with that case though is if there's a firestorm on the East Coast, if you don't have your app almost running at 100% capacity on the West Coast, everybody's running to the West Coast to try to spin stuff up, and it's out of capacity. I think people saw that back last year, April 2011, where nobody could spin up instances anywhere because everybody was trying.
The reason people couldn't spin up instances was because they were having Amazon had really their worst outage ever because it was an architectural failure. And EBS was basically broken across the whole region. There are a couple things you can do. Yes, you're right, that if US East went down and everybody said, let's go to the West, that could be really interesting. There are a couple things you can do. One is run your main stuff at West and use East as your failover instead of the other way around. The other is that you can use reserved instances to reserve like a bare minimum footprint so that you can at least get your app up and running so you don't have to get instances when you go over there, but you don't try to run the entire footprint.
I don't think the regions are actually in one data center. They're in different data centers, very close by geographically.
The availability zones are in the same part of the country.
Yeah.
The regions are separate parts of the country.
And
so this is going to be a really simplistic question compared to some of the stuff you guys are talking about, but as compared to a dedicated machine, how, could I get better performance out of a cloud machine?
potentially,
in that space?
it depends on how things are architected.
Okay.
I brought up something already with Amazon. If you need high I/O, lots of input-output going on, for Amazon, if you really want that, you're going to end up striping EBS volumes together, mirroring them together and stuff like that, and paying for all your space. Because Amazon has no guarantees on that kind of stuff. I don't know. I've talked to customers who've tried to do things like literally 1,000 IOs a second out on Amazon, and it takes 14, 15 EBS volumes together to reach that. That's kind of high I/O. But at the same time, you have the other side of things. Company Mark works for, they make a storage system capable of handling 20,000 plus IOs a second easily over gig Ethernet.
Yeah,
so in that regard, I'm answering it more complicated than I probably cared about.
Yeah.
But the point is that if your provider is architected to handle that kind of stuff, then you could see far superior performance. Most people have a dedicated server, a server, not servers. Usually have a couple of SATA disks in there. They may have them mirrored together. They may have a RAID 5 with 2 terabyte drives at 5,400 RPM.
Yeah.
The I/O on that's going to suck. Your boot up times are going to suck.
Yeah.
And Ben, who works for me, and I both believe everything installs faster virtually. Everything boots up faster virtually compared to bare hardware. And we've tested that out on the exact same piece of hardware. You just throw VMware ESXi on it, no big licensing or anything like that, and then install Windows 2K or 2 again. And it will take 10 minutes from the disk. You do it on the bare hardware, 25 to 30.
Okay, the only reason I was asking because some of the stuff I do is a lot of physics processing and a little bit of network I/O, not so much on the disk.
Yeah, well, if you're doing physics processing, you gotta read that data and write it back out.
Yeah.
What size of your files? So all that stuff has to be evaluated. As far as CPUs go, yes.